At the outset of the movie, a working man, Levon Cade was depicted in a state of slumber within the confines of his automobile. Upon the arrival of morning's light, he executed his routine of oral hygiene and prepared himself for the day's labor, which, in a stroke of convenience, was situated in close proximity to his temporary abode. Presently, the account revealed Levon Cade was employed in the construction sector, an enterprise under the stewardship of the esteemed Garcia family. A digression into Levon Cade's past unveiled his former occupation as a soldier. His work associates constituted what he considered his family. Upon Levon Cade's arrival at the office, the figure of Joe came into view, alongside Joe's spouse, Carla, their daughter, Jenny, and the Garcia family, who held the reins of the construction endeavor. These individuals regarded Levon Cade as one of their own. Gazing outward, Levon Cade's attention was drawn to a black vehicle. Within this automobile, a group of menacing figures were engaged in the act of assaulting a worker, their motives shrouded in obscurity. Prompted by this display of violence, Levon Cade intervened, commanding the aggressors to cease their actions and inquiring into the cause of their brutality. In response, these individuals adopted a hostile demeanor, brandishing firearms with the intent to terminate Levon Cade's life. However, Levon Cade proved to be a formidable adversary. He retaliated with force, inflicting a severe beating upon them. As reinforcements for the assailants arrived, Levon Cade, recognizing the escalating threat, drew his own firearm for self-preservation, a weapon he had kept within reach. He aimed the gun at the approaching thugs, asserting his desire to avoid any conflict. Subsequently, the individuals who had initially displayed aggression retreated from the scene in silence. Some time elapsed, and Jenny approached Levon Cade, presenting him with a packed lunch and urging him to partake. The narrative elucidated that Levon Cade lacked a permanent residence, not even occupying a rented dwelling. His car served as his makeshift home. As the workday concluded, Levon Cade made his way to meet his daughter, Mary. The account clarified that he indeed had a daughter, though her mother had passed away. Levon Cade had entrusted Mary's care to his father-in-law. While an option existed for him to reside at his father-in-law's home, he chose not to, out of consideration for his mother-in-law, who was already burdened with the responsibility of caring for his granddaughter. Upon his release from work, Levon Cade escorted Mary to a restaurant for a pleasant dining experience. It was there that he presented Mary with the last remaining photograph of her mother, a poignant memento. Upon beholding the image, Mary voiced her resentment towards her mother for what she perceived as abandonment. The scene then transitioned to Jenny, who was depicted enjoying a social gathering with her friends at a nightclub. Her consumption of alcohol reached excess, leading to a deterioration in her friend's condition. She retrieved her bag and proceeded to the restroom, ostensibly to freshen up. Within this private space, Jenny conveyed to her friend that it was time and that she was returning home. However, the moment Jenny stepped out of the washroom, she was abducted by an unknown assailant. The following day progressed, and by early afternoon, Jenny had not yet returned to her residence. Overwhelmed by anxiety, he found himself constantly reminiscing about his daughter, replaying videos of her. In his distress, Joe approached Levon Cade, expressing his apprehension that relying solely on police intervention might jeopardize Jenny's well-being. He implored Levon Cade to undertake the task of locating his daughter, offering a substantial monetary reward in return. Joe justified his request by citing Levon Cade's prior military service, believing his skills would be invaluable in such a situation. Witnessing Joe's profound distress, Levon Cade offered his reassurance, vowing to find Jenny regardless of the obstacles. Joe found solace in Levon Cade's promise, confident in his capabilities. Subsequently, Levon Cade retrieved several photographs and initiated his personal investigation. His initial point of inquiry was the nightclub from which Jenny had vanished. At the club, he observed a bartender engaging in clandestine transactions, accepting money and illicitly selling drugs to patrons. Levon Cade had been a silent observer of these activities for a considerable period, and surmised that the bartender, due to his involvement in the drug trade, likely possessed pertinent information, potentially linking him to more influential figures. Consequently, Levon Cade discreetly followed the bartender to his private residence. Levon Cade confronted the bartender, aiming a firearm at him and stating his search for a young woman who had disappeared from the club the previous night. The bartender feigned ignorance, claiming that numerous women frequented the establishment and asserting his lack of knowledge regarding the specific individual in question. Undeterred, Levon Cade employed his own methods to elicit information from the bartender, subjecting him to repeated bouts of torture by forcibly submerging him in a bathtub. Abruptly, Levon Cade detected the sound of voices. The bartender's associates had arrived at his home and were calling out to him. Hearing their voices, the bartender emitted a loud cry, alerting his friends to the possibility of trouble. Levon Cade emerged from the residence, accompanied by the bartender, at which point the bartender's companions discharged their firearms, striking him. Amidst this sudden violence, Levon Cade reacted swiftly, seizing an opportunity to shoot both of the bartender's friends, resulting in their deaths. The scene then shifted to Jenny, who was confined within a locked room. Upon regaining consciousness, her thoughts turned to her parents, and she uttered apologies, regretting her past disobedience in disregarding their warnings against nighttime social outings. The following morning, Levon Cade was observed outside the bartender's house, seated within his vehicle. After a period of waiting, a man named Huladmir arrived at the bartender's residence, presumably intending to meet him for some undisclosed business, unaware of the grim tableau within. Huladmir's purpose was to collect a sum of money from the bartender. However, upon discovering the lifeless bodies and the undisturbed cache of money and narcotics, Huladmir realized the situation was not a simple robbery, suspecting a more deliberate act of violence. Unwilling to become entangled in this perilous scenario, Huladmir retreated to his vehicle and quietly departed. Unbeknownst to him, Levon Cade had been observing him and followed him to his own residence. Concealed within the nearby forest, Levon Cade used a camera to maintain surveillance over Huladmir. Levon Cade witnessed Huladmir perpetrating the murder of his own wife, the motive remaining obscure. Following this act, Levon Cade entered the house and killed Huladmir, subsequently binding his body to a chair. Upon seeing Levon Cade, Huladmir recognized him as the individual responsible for the deaths of his associates. He pleaded with Levon Cade, asserting his lack of affiliation with any criminal organizations and simply requesting information about the missing girl. He offered to provide details in exchange for his freedom, suggesting that a man named Dimmy was likely involved, thus precipitating the deaths of his men. Levon Cade, fearing Huladmir might impede his pursuit of Dimmy, forcibly submerged him in the nearby water, causing his demise. As Levon Cade departed the scene of this latest act, another individual named Arthur arrived, accompanied by his 2 grandchildren, Lucas and Tom. Upon entering the residence, Arthur discovered that his trusted associate had been murdered. Recognizing the critical importance of connections within his illicit enterprise, Arthur was concerned about the disruption this death would cause. More significantly, he sought to identify the perpetrator. Arthur instructed his grandchildren that he desired the individual responsible to be brought to him alive. The scene then shifted to Levon Cade, who contacted a friend within the police department, requesting information regarding a person known as Dimmy. Utilizing his connection within law enforcement, Levon Cade successfully obtained certain details concerning Dimmy. He learned that to make contact with Dimmy, his initial step should be to locate an individual named Dutch. His police contact provided the name of a bar where Dutch was likely to be found. Upon arriving at the establishment, Levon Cade offered Dutch a sum of money. While Dutch was not readily accessible to all, Levon Cade's substantial financial incentive secured him an audience. Levon Cade informed Dutch that he had a potential buyer willing to pay a significant price for narcotics, feigning an interest in entering the drug trade as a strategic maneuver to establish contact with Dimmy. Levon Cade presented Dutch with a thick bundle of currency and received a quantity of drugs in return. However, rather than distributing these illicit substances, Levon Cade proceeded to discard them into a nearby body of water. The narrative then shifted its focus to Viper and his companion, who were depicted meeting with a client identified as Roboto. Roboto presented them with a box filled with money. It was revealed that Viper and his companion were the individuals responsible for Jenny's abduction. They had rendered her unconscious, concealed her within a suitcase, and delivered her to Roboto, their client, who compensated them handsomely for her capture. The scene transitioned once more, this time to Levon Cade on the following morning. Dutch contacted him by phone, inquiring about his client's satisfaction with the procured drugs. Levon Cade fabricated a positive response, stating that the client was exceedingly pleased and desired a larger quantity, offering a substantial payment. Dutch expressed his satisfaction, instructing Levon Cade to bring the money and promising a gift in return. Subsequently, Levon Cade donned a suit and boots and proceeded to the address provided by Dutch. There he finally encountered Dimmy. Upon recognizing the man before him as Dimmy, Levon Cade's immediate impulse was to draw his firearm and demand information regarding Jenny. However, the presence of numerous individuals in the vicinity deterred him from such an impulsive action. It was apparent that bribing Dutch had provided a relatively straightforward path to Dimmy. Dimmy, in need of a dependable distributor for his drug operations, did not subject Levon Cade to rigorous scrutiny and readily agreed to a business arrangement, shaking hands to seal the deal. Following this transaction, Levon Cade once again disposed of the illicit substances by throwing them into a body of water upon his return home. Later, while reviewing photographs taken at Jenny's club, Levon Cade noticed Viper in the background, seemingly observing Jenny. Utilizing the bartender's phone, still in his possession, Levon Cade discovered a series of text messages exchanged between the bartender and Viper, alluding to Jenny. One particular message contained the name Hate Saloon. The narrative later revealed that Hate Saloon was a former establishment. Within the club's control room, Viper's girlfriend was monitoring the situation and observed Levon Cade. It became increasingly evident that these events were part of a calculated scheme to ensnare Levon Cade. These individuals had deliberately sent a message to the bartender's phone, anticipating that the person responsible for his death would investigate the location mentioned. Upon realizing the extent of the deception, Levon Cade entered his car and attempted to flee. However, Lucas and Tom pursued him relentlessly in their own vehicle. In his attempt to escape, Levon Cade inadvertently collided with a police car. Mistakenly believing the officers would offer assistance, Levon Cade was unaware that the police were also complicit in the scheme. Consequently, Levon Cade was apprehended by these individuals. They were in the process of transporting him to Arthur when Levon Cade, unwilling to submit passively, launched an attack. During the ensuing struggle, a stray bullet struck the driver of their vehicle, causing a catastrophic accident. The car careened towards a nearby pond. Levon Cade managed to extricate himself from the vehicle just before it plunged into the water and sank, resulting in the deaths of Lucas and Tom. The following day, when Arthur received news of this development, his fury intensified, as Levon Cade had now been responsible for the deaths of his grandchildren. The narrative then shifted to depict Viper and his girlfriend meeting with Dimmy. It was revealed that Dimmy and Viper were brothers, although their relationship was strained, leading Dimmy to operate his own criminal enterprise independently of Viper's activities. At this juncture, Dimmy had summoned Viper to a meeting to address his actions, expressing considerable anger. He informed Viper that his single mistake, the kidnapping of the girl for a meager sum, had initiated a chain of violent deaths, as the individual searching for her was systematically eliminating anyone involved. Sometime later, after Viper and his girlfriend had departed, Arthur met with Dimmy. Arthur informed Dimmy that someone had murdered his father by drowning him and expressed his astonishment at Dimmy's apparent lack of concern. The narrative clarified that Joe was, in fact, the Huladmir whom Levon Cade had drowned, and Huladmir was Dimmy's father. Dimmy responded indifferently, stating that he had no connection with his father and felt no remorse. Arthur countered that he did care, as this same individual had killed many of his associates. With this, he presented Dimmy with a photograph of Levon Cade, obtained from security camera footage. Upon seeing the image, Dimmy was visibly shocked, realizing that the person with whom he had been conducting business was also responsible for the recent killings. Dimmy explained that Levon Cade had enticed him with money, and their relationship was purely transactional. He then intended to provide Levon Cade's driver's license to Arthur, as it was customary to surrender such identification for their dealings. Utilizing this document, Arthur's associates were able to procure Levon Cade's complete personal information. In the immediate aftermath of this discovery, Arthur himself arrived at Levon Cade's father-in-law's residence. The scene then shifted to Levon Cade, who received an urgent phone call from Mary's school informing him that no one had come to pick her up that day. Alarmed, Levon Cade immediately went to his daughter's school and retrieved her. Subsequently, Levon Cade proceeded to his father-in-law's house and discovered it engulfed in flames. Without hesitation, Levon Cade rushed into the burning building to rescue his father-in-law. Miraculously, he found his father-in-law unharmed. He carried his father-in-law out of the house. Aside from some minor burns to his beard and hair, his father-in-law was safe. He then took Mary to the home of an old friend, intending to leave her there for her safety. His friend provided him with an assortment of weapons, which Levon Cade gathered. After bidding farewell to his daughter, he embarked on his mission to resolve the unfolding crisis. The scene then focused on Viper and his girlfriend, who were transporting Jenny to an undisclosed location. Jenny was depicted silently praying, prompting Amira to issue a harsh threat, warning her to be quiet or face being shot. Provoked by this menace, Jenny retaliated, physically attacking Amira with kicks and punches, causing their vehicle to veer out of control and crash. Amidst the chaos of the accident, Jenny seized an opportunity to escape from the wrecked car and fled into the dense forest. Both Viper and Amira made strenuous efforts to locate her, but their search proved futile. Eventually, Jenny spotted a police vehicle and ran towards it, hoping for assistance. However, her hopes were cruelly dashed when the officers apprehended her and delivered her back into the custody of Viper. The narrative then returned to Levon Cade, who arrived at Demi's hideout, fully armed and prepared for a confrontation. After eliminating numerous of Demi's men, he also inflicted injuries upon Demi himself. Levon Cade interrogated Demi, demanding information about the missing girl. He offered Demi a choice: cooperate and live, or face the same fate as those he had already killed in his pursuit of Jenny. Demi, valuing his life above all else, implicated his brother, offering to lead Levon Cade to the location where Viper took the abducted girls for his clients. Ultimately, Demi guided Levon Cade to the address where Viper was holding Jenny. Despite his promise to Demi that he would spare his life, Levon Cade in such circumstances did not adhere to his word and fatally shot Demi. The scene then shifted inside the location, revealing that Viper had indeed taken Jenny there, along with Roberto, his client. Levon Cade, fully prepared, made his entrance, creating a loud explosion as a diversion. Seizing the opportunity created by the chaos, he opened fire, eliminating everyone in his path. He then confronted Viper, engaging him in a brutal fight, ultimately killing him and his girlfriend. Levon Cade rescued Jenny and returned her to her relieved family. Jenny's family was both surprised and immensely happy to see her alive, as they had feared the worst. Thus, Levon Cade successfully saved Jenny's life and subsequently returned to his daughter, bringing this chapter of the story to a close.